You're listening to the smooth, sultry, velvety voice of the Philosophy Club Radio Hour. You're listening to KDOX Web Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Tejas. We are the voice of Richland College. Disclaimer, views expressed on this show are Jack's own, managing editor Jack's own, unless otherwise stated, and do not reflect the opinion of KDOX Web Radio, Richland College, or the DCCCD. Ladies and gentlemen, Season 7, Episode 3 of the Philosophy Club Radio Hour. A few things. We fired Orlando. That's a joke. Orlando is running late right now because he is attending a meeting, as I knock my headphones off in a most professional fashion. He's attending a meeting on student service learning. So he's attempting to negotiate a partnership of sorts with the Ross Perot Museum of Science as an opportunity for volunteer work through the Philosophy Club. A rather noble idea. I'd like to give him credit for it, but I got to be honest with you, it's my idea. That's a joke. It was entirely Orlando's. And I'm very impressed by it, and hopefully it's going to work out. He had to meet when they were available, as you might suspect. So kind of holding it down here, and hopefully he'll have good news. Tidings of great joy when he returns. We'll see. Oh, and look who decided to show up casually late. It's my friend and colleague, Tim Sullivan. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Galen Scoggins.
I didn't know Tim Sullivan became younger and more filled with joy.
I agree. Filled with joy. He looks like he was hungry for joy, and now he's filled it. Wonder Dogs. Hashtag Wonder Dogs. And yeah, so, but we have got somebody pinch hitting here, so to speak. We have the, at long last, the collaboration is manifesting itself on the level of the radio show. We have the vice president of the Anthropology Club. So I guess that makes him some position in the Philanthropology Club. He's an officer. He's a leader.
Yes.
He's a discussion guider, and he's very good at it. That's our friend Jack. So, Jack, let me tell you something. I'm imagining you've seen every episode of the show and you're a huge fan, but just in case you're not, the way we do things is we'll begin with introductions and promotions. So if there's anything you want to plug, now is the time. And, of course, introduce yourself.
Well, as you said, I am technically the vice president of the Anthropology Club. Right now, my position within the Philanthropy Club is unknown. I think it's going to be a while till everyone settles which is going to be which.
That's a good point.
So hopefully we'll make it into more of a Russian, Soviet kind of form of leadership.
Roulette, yes. Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, I haven't seen or heard your series, unfortunately. So this is kind of my first experience. So hopefully it's going to be as good as any other radio show here at Richland College. So looking forward.
Well, let me stop you right there. It's better. I just realized that Kalen's had his mic off the whole time.
Oh, there you go.
There he is. Here
That's
we
why
go.
I couldn't hear myself. So they heard y'all's responses.
Exactly.
But that's it.
Maybe my mic picked it up. We'll see.
It's okay. I'm used to being part of one-sided conversations.
Don't we all? Don't we all?
But yes, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I asked Jack to be here for 15 minutes. He doesn't realize we padlocked the studio, and so he'll be here for the whole hour. Yes.
Darn it.
But you raise a good point. We have to settle the hierarchy of sorts for the philanthropology. My whole thing is this. I'll be honest with you. It really doesn't matter the title so much as it matters the contribution. And it seems as though for the philanthropology, because it's two clubs, we could have co's. We could have co-presidents, co-vice presidents, things along those lines. So I guess I brought you in here today to brief you on your demotion. I'm joking.
Sweet!
But no, you also hold other roles as well. You're the managing editor of the Richland Chronicle, which is pretty impressive.
Yes, I do. It's
I was being sarcastic. I'm joking.
It's okay. I do fond with the idea of sarcasm. I think sarcasm is one of the greatest gifts to ever be accomplished by a human.
Call me Santa Claus, pal, because that's all I deliver. So yeah, look. I'm happy to have you here, and I'll say this again. I think you're new to Richland, right?
No, I just finished my first year. I'm starting my second year, so
yeah. So pretty new, brand spanking new. It's only been a few days, and see sarcasm. But I'll tell you what, I love what you bring to the table in the Philosophy Club. The contributions you make, I think, are thought provoking, and you do a good job of keeping people on topic, which
Also sarcasm.
yeah, we brought you here to roast you.
Yes, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, anthropology is the lesser known of philosophy, so.
Which honestly isn't fair. I think. Hang on a second. I'm sorry. I want the good people to see Kalen's face. So here we are.
Kalen, move to the right or the left. I don't know. I can't.
Stage directions.
I'm going to stay right in the middle.
Hey, moderate. And so, like I said, I think you're doing a tremendous job. I'm really happy that you're on the radio show. And I guess I had a question. Actually, wait, we're not doing introductions. That's Ken Scoggins. I do have a question. What is it that drew you to anthropology? Because as you point out, and we're going to get into the topic, but anthropology does seem to be a lesser-known social science, which it's a shame because it's a fantastic one. It's especially, I think, deep and, not to pick favorites, but anthropology, I think, is a special social science in a very positive way. And I think that it's woefully undersold.
It kind of is, because I think many people can confuse anthropology with whatever you guys are doing. I just forgot about it. Philosophy.
Thanks for the respect.
Yeah, philosophy. So it kind of blends in. It's kind of hard to separate them apart.
I agree.
And granted, the most people have on regarding to anthropology could be like Indiana Jones or probably those good old History Channel documentaries about dinosaurs and ancient civilizations. So yeah, unless you're a fanatic of like ancient history or dinosaurs itself, I think that's probably a common thing people can relate to anthropology.
So are you a fan of dinosaurs? Is that what you're saying?
When I was little, I definitely was.
Me too.
They did love enjoying me some Discovery Channel, History Channel documentaries on the Triassic and Jurassic periods. But I'm more of
I don't know what those are.
I'm of an ancient civilization, kind of like understanding the Roman, the Mesoamerican, the Mesopotamian cultures. I think that's one of the reasons why I got drawn into the Anthropology Club, because I wanted to know more.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I mean, anthropos is the Greek word for man, and so ology is that translation, the English suffix to logos. So it's the study of man, and yeah, that sounds very philosophical. But what makes I feel, at least, again, I'm no expert. I'm no Tim Sullivan, but I feel like anthropology as a social science is perhaps maybe even one of the most philosophical. Because, again, you're studying the history of man in all of its concrete detail. You're studying artifacts. You're studying cultures and traditions, which, again, was the topic of last week, was culture v. tradition, culture versus tradition, which kind of implies that there's an antagonism there, although it's not necessarily what we thought.
Yeah, I mean, for always, there's always an equal and opposite, so.
True. You're a physics minor. I'm joking.
Newtonian anthropology.
That would be that paper would be published by somebody somewhere. But yeah, here's the thing. And I'm going to speak bluntly here. I think anthropology is sexy. I think it's intriguing. It's alluring if you really give it the time of day. If you give it the respect that I feel like, I don't know, it's not necessarily known for. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're hearing this thing, Tim Sullivan, we mean no disrespect.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. No, on the contrary, Tim Sullivan is the bastion of this. He's the dude who, look, this is absolutely no laying into Tim Sullivan. I mean, if we want to criticize him, we could pick on other things. I'm joking. He's the best. No, I admire the guy greatly. But I'll say this, anthropology in general, as a discipline, you don't find a lot of anthro majors, like in anywhere, which is
It's kind of ironic. It's kind of ironic because right now, when we live in an age of like technology and people are getting connected around the world, you think that anthropology will make a big impact because it basically it teaches us everything from like how we speak, how we interact within our environment, how such environment itself affects the way we build things, we communicate, we basically diffuse our ideas and cultures around the planet.
Yeah.
So,
but again, that sounds like philosophy.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's a real intimacy between the two. I mean, I think that they are of a similar ilk, if you want to put it that way, or lineage. But what makes anthropology different is that they're methodical, you can argue.
Yeah, you can say I guess you can probably be basing more on the logic side since...
Yeah, they take a scientific approach to things. They empirically investigate, and then they try to draw sort of generalizations based upon, artifacts, perhaps. I could be wrong.
I mean, that's my interpretation. I think anthropology has more of logic and more facts-based than philosophy, whereas philosophy, you can make a question and you can have multiple outcomes, and within those outcomes, you can have you branching out to even more. So it's kind of more open, while as anthropology, you have to follow a pattern to get to the answer that you're looking for.
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, it's that adherence to pattern, for better, for the most part.
Yeah, my understanding is that like contemporary anthropology in particular just uses a lot of the same, general, I guess, quantitative methods of the social sciences in general. That's my understanding anyway, which gives it a very different kind of methodology and just kind of, I guess, tenor with some of its investigations.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And again, philosophy is housed in the HIFPA school, which is Humanities, Fine, and Performing Arts. Philosophy, according to Richland, is considered more of an art than a science. Anthropology is in the social sciences division. It's considered more of a science than an art. But you could argue that anthropology really rides the line. It walks the line more than maybe anything else.
Social sciences and wellness represent.
There you go. Yeah, that's Professor Scoggins' division.
Government also.
Then anyway, we could argue that arts could also be considered kind of a social science course or kind of theme.
That's interesting. How so?
Well, art has also been influenced by history itself. So
it's very true.
You have to understand that throughout history, painters were there was like a trend. Sometimes they'll be focusing on religious forms of art, then there will be like landscape, and then there'll be like self portraits. So.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they're focusing on, again, an approach that requires technique, that requires sort of mastery of a of a way to apply the knowledge to the matter itself. Okay, I see what you're saying, but at the same time, I feel as though anthropology is, how I put this, a very enriched social science, because it is so rooted in the historical traditions of things, not just theoretically, but concretely. Yeah. You have to talk about both the historical interpretations of mankind as well as the actual physical artifacts that testify to one theory or another. And I kind of admire that.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful, Basically, what you're seeing when you go to the to museums, like you go to a museum and you see this weird relic, either that be a plate, a knife, or a piece of clothing, and it's like, what was this used? Was this ceremonious? Was this for like war purposes, or was this just like your everyday kind of use? So
yeah, and when you're talking about things like, again, religion and philosophy, you are, I think, talking anthropology. Yeah. Ask you this: what do you see the comparison, or I should say this? What do you see the complementarity in between for anthropology and I guess journalism? Are you a journalism minor, or you just like to do it?
Well, ironically, I'm doing logistics, and well,
what?
Yes.
Well, you're running. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Chief and editor Adrian Aguilar, she first introduced me to journalism like at the end of fall 2018.
Okay.
So yeah, I got to learn the ropes of journalism. Yeah. So it became
Adrian. Joke.
So like, boss. I think how philosophy and journalism actually have some complementary. Because not only you're telling stories, you're trying to understand what's the significance of the story and its impact it will have in the population.
Absolutely.
It's actually really interesting with like with anthropology, philosophy, and centering around kind of story.
Absolutely. I mean, that sort of thing. I feel narrative is very significant in a variety, especially as you're putting it, Caitlin, as a nexus of kind of interdisciplinary, like a middle point. I think I love the students like seeing those connections. Now, yeah. So would you say Adrian is the editor-in-chief of the Chronicle, and she kind of interned under Allie last semester?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, Allie was she's been on the radio show many times. She was in my honors ethics class. She's fantastic. She wrote me from Disney World recently. I hope she's doing well. And so I like to see that connection between the sort of the journalism department as investigative journalism and the philosophy departments as sort of our program as encouraging questions. And I think anthropology is sort of the site where they meet. What is appropriate for a human being? What is a human being? What should student human beings expect? It all makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, everything is connected one way or another. So it's mostly if asking the right questions and taking the right paths to find the answer you're looking for, which again, philosophy and anthropology can provide the tools which will guide you and not derail you.
Yeah, and tools, another big, subject of anthropology. Okay, so I think that's a perfect segue. It's not, but I'm gonna pretend it is.
I'm going to start calling people student humans,
Student humans.
like you just did, Jeff.
Well, look, you have students, and then you have humans. When do they meet? That could be a
you
club
have
question.
student humans, people who are studying to be human.
Isn't that what philosophy is?
Actually, arguably, yeah.
Yeah, seriously. Am I being human well? Isn't that psychology? Isn't that
Am I
anthropology?
humaning right?
Exactly. Dasein. Am I being human being? Anyways, so that brings us to a very human topic of culture versus tradition. What was your sense? So we have segments on this show. It's a professional radio show. We've been doing this 7 years. I've been nominated for a few, Grammys. Does that make sense? Is that the right award?
Sure.
For this, although I will be fair to myself. If you go there and look at the awards, I don't know what they call it, shelf over there, you'll see Philosophy Club, because we won best something of something according to somebody
So
a few years
memorable.
ago, and that's because we're dope. So. I'll say this: culture versus tradition was maybe one of my favorite topics ever in Philosophy Club.
It really was, and it actually got
yeah.
heated by the end, which is
I love
something that I really like about when it comes to like open debates,
Totally.
clubs, because it's just you don't know what's gonna happen. I think our first one, I forgot what we were talking about. It was kind of like, okay, we managed to go through, but like when you get to the
It's
point,
an honest appraisal.
yeah, and to the point you get heated and people are just like eager to like share their opinions and then probably like claw someone's like throat out. It's like,
Yeah,
I guess that's like real study of human interaction.
that's what I'm saying.
Come to Philosophy Club. There might be violence.
Yeah, bring your armor.
We are the civilized version of NASCAR.
We're the NASCAR of the intellectual realm.
You have a T-shirt idea there.
That's pretty good. So I agree. I love the passion, and the passion was maybe just a little bit lacking at first, but that's only because I think people were trying to get their bearings. I mean, we had over 40 people that first meeting. It's like, they're like, what is this? And now they're more like, okay, I feel like I get it. Now let me chime in, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, I had to leave early because I had to go to a meeting. But when I left, there was still a big conversation. I had some students come afterwards to my office being like, Marcus is still down there, talking about this
I
stuff.
walked by
Yeah, that
probably
was you.
good 45 minutes later, and there were still at least probably 5-7 people in there talking.
Yeah, and people need to realize that's not how it is for 98% of clubs on campus. Usually when the club meeting is over, people are kind of getting the hell out of there. It was not the case this time. People didn't want it to end. They wanted to continue to talk. They were, feeling very, into the conversation, into the dialogue. They were inspired. It was inspired conversation.
Yeah, I mean,
And I don't want to take all the credit, but I'm sorry, what you're saying?
Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry, but it takes a while because, like I said, like I said, people were new. It's like you don't know what's going on, and I'm expecting and hoping that throughout the semester and semesters following afterwards, we can have even more, hopefully, bloodshed. So, yeah.
You heard it here first, folks. Calls for violence.
Hashtag bloodshed. Hashtag Thunderducks. Hashtag Richland Chronicle.
Hashtag be on Thunderdome.
Did you say the disclaimer today, Jeff?
I did.
Yes.
Dude, I like that. Hashtag Thunderdome. That is awesome.
Wonderdome.
Yeah, hashtag Wonderdome. Jack, can we cut it out where they suggest that and then pretend like I'm saying it for the first time? It's our executive producer, Jack Fletcher. I want a Thunderdome. That would be great. It wasn't that long ago where we had like political debates broadcasted live through KDUX. When I say political debates, I don't mean like the national ones, but I mean like among our community, where you had like certain clubs debating over theories and there was bloodshed.
Well, wait a minute. You had the film series meet in the planetarium yesterday, right?
Thank you for that. I wanted to shout that out.
Well, no, the shape of the room, Wonderdome.
So if people know Wichita Hall 116 on campus, it used to be a fully functional planetarium, one of very few in the area. It's kind of hibernating for the time being, but yeah, that's where the Philosophy Club has its film series, PHILM film series. Last night's 3:30 to 6 p.m. Free pizza, free popcorn, free Nestea. No, not Nestea. It was Brisk. That's Brisk, baby.
Important difference.
Nestle, I
It
do
was
not want
to
to
some
fund
people.
the empire of Nestle.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's an actual domed room because it used to be a planetarium. So
I'm cool like Nestea. You're sweet like Nestle. All right, let's get to the freestyle section. Did you know this was part of the program? No, I'm joking. No, but yeah, it was interesting because look, we had 20 people show up right in the nose, which was pretty good for the first film series screening, and it was with the Examined Life, and we had a great conversation. It was very similar to the Philosophy Club. I said, okay, 3:30 to 5:30, we'll go to 6 for the conversation. It was like 6:15, and people didn't want to leave, and that's late for a Wednesday for a hump day. So yeah, very very excited about just how excited others were to talk about these kinds of things, and I'll say this: it ties back to the whole enthusiasm of which you're speaking. Sometimes it has to grow a little bit. Sometimes you have to feel comfortable before you feel confident. If that makes sense.
I could see a lot of confidence last meeting, definitely, especially for two people whose names I will not mention.
Yeah, and you can if you're curious as to that, if you go to the Richland Philosophy Club Instagram page, we live broadcast the meetings every Tuesday, and then we put them on a live story, and so they're live for 48 hours, so you can see what we're talking about. At any rate, yeah. Let's turn to the topic now. It's 3:32. Culture versus tradition. Don't worry, I talked to the Chronicle, and they're going to give you, time paid. Before you go, because again, I had to sort of bribe him to get here. That's not true. I just said, hey.
I was kidnapped.
Your fellow. If you don't come on the show right now, Anthropology is dead. I'm joking.
That's it. We just end the deal. No more anthropology and philosophy. That's it. We're cutting ties. I'm going to call the president, just tell her, yeah, we're out. We're declaring war.
Yeah, not to anthropologize, but I made that joke last week, and I'm going to keep making it every week.
God,
I believe you.
Now, Jack, again, you did a good job of sort of making sure that the conversation was sort of going in a way that was, organized. But I don't feel like you got a lot of time to say your own thoughts on this. Now, tradition versus culture, a very anthropological concept or topic. Do you see a difference between tradition and culture?
No, I think this is kind of one of those symbiotic cases where one complements the other, and if one is missing, then you can't have the other one, because your culture traditions are born, and within each tradition, the more they morph and adapt through time changing, they can define the culture itself. So
I see.
You kind of need both.
But doesn't that run the risk of unjust or unjust cultures forming and unjust traditions and thereby, societies?
It will, and unfortunately it has happened, and that's something that can be avoided. Can we at least manage to reduce the amount of problems that can arise? Definitely.
Okay, because I'm trying to think back. So, again, Tim made this point about how cultures and traditions, while distinct, as you're saying, are complementary. And I think we kind of got on it. This is the requack, by the way. So yeah, Jack, we're Thunder Ducks, and so instead of recapping, we requack. It's the requack.
Oh my God.
Pause for laughter.
I'm leaving.
Jack, lock the door. And so, what I noticed was people were trying to take it chronologically. They're like, well, what comes first, historically speaking? And I like your point about symbiosis. I think this was also, Tim's point and some other people's points as well, is that they emerge, contemporaneously in such a way where a tradition is itself the effects, so to speak, of a culture, but the culture itself is reinforced by traditional values that precede it. So it's not as though, to avoid an infinite regression, it's not as though there's one first and then the other second. It's more along the lines of, again, the contemporaneous. They emerge in tandem with one another. The question then becomes, once a tradition is formed and the cultural customs and rituals follow therefrom, or you could say once a culture is formed and then that begets rituals, which become tradition, however you want to look at it. It becomes semantics at a certain point. How do you appraise said culture? How do you appraise or critique said tradition? And I threw it out there. I was like, well, maybe you could have a tradition of criticism, where the tradition is to be critical of the culture in such a way where it improves or refines the culture.
Well, didn't the Christians do that back in the Crusades?
Yeah, you know we're a neo-Christian program, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. Anyways.
Yeah, but I'm sarcastic.
No, I'm not familiar with the term. But yeah, so what do you mean by that? I think you're making an excellent point, frankly. How have the Christians, ostensibly done that? Did you say imperialism? Yeah, okay, that's one way to put it. And so the idea is this. I like that you're pushing back on that because, Tim was doing the same thing. He was saying, and it goes all the way back to the very first topic, which was, if you remember, progress, evolution. Is it possible for a culture to evolve in a way that makes it quote unquote better? Or is it just a culture changes based upon environmental circumstances and, adaptation and the like? And if it's the latter, it's a little tough to judge other cultures because you could say, well, they're responding to their circumstances.
Yeah. Like I said, everyone has a different opinion. So, as always in a society, there's going to be always those who agree and those who oppose. And, it's going to be difficult to finding at least one culture or tradition where everyone's going to be 100% on it.
Yeah. I think it's impossible, frankly. But then that makes anthropology all the more necessary. It's like, well, if we can understand what a human being is, maybe we can understand what it needs as an organism to prosper, to flourish.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, bringing up the issue of a critical tradition. Yeah, if we're talking about cultures, also talk about countercultures. And at what point does a counterculture become kind of a tradition in its own right? Which seems to be related to the idea of, or the question of whether or not it's possible to have a thoroughgoing critical culture. A kind of a culture that is itself based on anti-culture, I suppose, or the questioning tradition. Yeah. Okay. Well, no, I was done there, but
yeah. So what he was saying, I wasn't paying attention. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Yeah, I got distracted with the.
That's
other,
okay. I get that from students all the time.
Logistics, folks.
No.
Wait, you're a professor?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I teach government.
Hey guys, so Jack
You look like a student.
Jack,
I'm flattered.
That's flattering. Jack just came by and said, "I guess we hadn't actually recorded, so let's start over." You were listening to Kate. That was a joke.
I need to get out of here.
What were you guys saying? Batten down the hatches.
The idea of if you have something like a counterculture, a kind of iconoclastic, approach to things, or maybe a culture that defines itself in opposition to tradition writ large, or tradition in general.
Yeah.
If that becomes widespread enough, at what point does that start becoming a tradition in its own right? And is that coherent? Is that sustainable? For the long run?
Is that
I'm
the
not
critical
sure.
tradition?
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any anthropological examples, I guess, to point to where that's been tried or put into practice in some way?
Well, honestly, it reminds me of an existential point.
Oh, yeah?
A point really emphasized by, among other people, Simone de Beauvoir, who argues, and again, you hear shades of Marxism, and you hear me smacking my lips into the mic because I'm an unprofessional. She says, look, throughout all of history, all of human history, especially in the West, predominantly in the West, there's always a dichotomy of a ruling class and a struggling class, an oppressed class.
Dialectic.
Yeah, exactly. The dialectic. It's this Hegelian notion that she, tries to recast in, overtly existential terms. But she's saying, listen, insofar as you always have that in society, to put it in Marxist terms, you have, the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, where you get the term bougie from, and the proletariats, the workforce, the blue collars. You always, if you're going to have that dichotomy, you're going to have countercultures, because you're going to have the oppressed lower class fighting for their autonomy, fighting for their individuality. trying to, again, assert their, again, individual personal identities in such a way where they are attempting to mitigate the oppression. And so iconoclastic approaches seem almost like a healthy antidote in some circumstances.
So to tie this back into the original or the first club topic, progress versus evolution, is there a telos to this kind of cultural dialectic?
I mean, Hegel says yes.
Right, oh, I know Hegel does, but is de Beauvoir, or just in general, is there a point at which this kind of interaction, this culture being superseded by counterculture, and that cycle continuing, is there a point when that would even possibly be able to stop, or is that just a perpetual, endless cycle?
It will not stop.
Yeah, and that's what she says.
Stop. Yeah. And honestly, I think the best thing we can do is prolong any escalation of a conflict. I think that's the best that can be done.
Huh.
Because, like I said, there's always going to be people who are going to be opposing to whatever you bring up to the table. So I guess the best thing we can do is just try to appease them, kind of like keep somewhat of a compromise.
But you like the tension.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be tension. And
okay.
Yeah.
So you think continual culture war is actually healthy then?
At one point, yeah. I mean, without them, how are we going to progress? I mean, what makes you think why Christianity became powerful in Europe and became prevalent? Because without war, say places like in Spain, that was heavily Muslim. Mm-hmm. Without it, then it would become Christian, and then without Christian, we wouldn't be having things like colonization and the discovery of the Americas.
It's very Hegelian.
It also very Machiavellian.
Very Machiavellian.
Well, no, because I mean, just the idea that something like political and cultural tumult is healthy for a society. That's a directly Machiavellian idea, and that if that goes away, you have kind of a stultified, dying society.
Yeah.
Yeah, a healthy distrust on some level. Shout out Sage Francis. A healthy distrust is necessary for the sake of, I guess, continued consideration of how to improve. Not necessarily guaranteeing the improvement itself.
Right.
But it's like this will help us try to get better. Assuming, again, that there is something from which to improve, which is your point, Kalen, assumes that there's progress to be made. SGA President George C.A. Currently disrupting the broadcast. Keep it moving, buddy. Anyways, do you want to come in? He can grab a mic if he wants. Jack locked the door. Well, let me ask you this. As somebody who, again, is enthusiastic by anthropology, do you feel as though evolution is, how to put this, not real, but do you think that we'll take it back to simpler terms. Do you think that human beings are capable of improving, or do you think any improvement is really just a difference, kind of like dressed up in some sort of propaganda, rhetorical clothing?
No, I think improvement is real.
Okay.
I mean, let's face it. I mean, and we have seen evidence of improvements, because take back at the Ice Age. I mean, humanity itself would have not survived, but weren't being for evolution and adaptive traits that help us survive freezing temperatures, I mean, we wouldn't be here. And theoretically speaking, because we have such adaptations to a major ice age, theoretically we could survive another one. And within that, we can even further adapt. So we're constantly adapting. I mean, if we look back at supposedly like the old versions of ourselves, back in the primitive ages, I mean, we've seen how we've come to adapt based on like our hide or bone structure. We've become more need for physical aggression and more for a diplomatic approach to everything.
Yeah, civic discourse. Yeah.
So do you identify, I guess, something as an improvement just by whether or not it actually contributes to survival?
Yeah, I mean, anything is an improvement, whether it's good or bad. So
if it's improvement, if it's bad,
you have bad improvements.
Bad things will happen for the sake of better things.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be bad for us, it's going to benefit someone else. So technically, that is somewhat of an opposite.
And Cornel West made this point. Was it Cornel West? No, I'm sorry. It was Slavoj Žižek made this point in yesterday's Faustian film series, where he said, we try to look at the world and ecologically speaking. He's saying we look at things, and as humans, we give values to natural events as they unfold organically in the natural environment. And it's like right now our lives are very much based upon oil reserves. And our oil resources are what's fundamental to preserving our lifestyle. People forget that what is oil? It's the result of a lot of decomposed dinosaurs and bodies and minerals and vitamins as a result of some sort of how to put this collision with an an astral meteor or something like that. Like it was a huge natural disaster that resulted in the casualties of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of living beings. And all of the remnants of that, of their material, of their decomposition, became oil. And now, thanks largely, if not entirely, to that, catastrophe, quote unquote, we have life, we have progress.
I mean, that's interesting, because to be honest, we
Glad
have
you think so.
become very dependent on petroleum oil.
Exactly.
And to be frankly, it's kind of scary that that's right now, currently, our only means of ever progressing to something more.
Well, we're so reliant on it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, begs the question, when will we find our next source? Personally, I hope for nuclear, because I think nuclear is the answer to the energy crisis.
Once again, the disclaimer. Well, okay. You know what? We that is such a fascinating statement. I'm sorry. Why do you think that?
Well, think about it. Nuclear energy gives you the most energy for your buck. I mean, there is nothing right now that can provide as much energy as at the split or collision of an atom.
Okay, that's fair.
And there's no shortage of atoms.
Yeah.
That's true. Shortage of Eves, though.
Oh, boy.
Anywho, oh boy. So, okay, that's interesting. Now, returning back quickly to this, culture versus tradition, what do we take to be the difference here? Like, I'll be honest with you, I still don't understand the difference. I don't see how they're completely differentiated, as, categorically one is something and the other something else. All I see is overlap.
I see that too.
Okay.
And maybe there is no difference. I mean, that could be a possibility. Maybe there's no difference, and we just want to see a difference just to kind of help us understand a bit more.
Yeah, okay, that's a really interesting point. And I think maybe that therein lies the difference. So it's like you can have a tradition that espouses certain beliefs in what is real and what is good and what is moral and what is holy and what is, happiness, etc. And then you could have a culture that says, well, we are of a culture where we challenge these presuppositions, where we try to either deepen them or, critique them or refine them. And so the culture becomes one of action and the tradition becomes one of a set of dogmas or tenets or codes of conduct.
I'm wondering if the more fundamental concept here is not one of practice.
Okay.
And that maybe culture is synchronic practice and tradition is diachronic practice.
Oh, yeah.
Another
That's
way
a good way to think of it, yeah.
Yeah, synchronic being like at the same time, right? You have just a set of practices, but if those practices get handed down over time, then that becomes a tradition. You can have an existing tradition and a culture that is distinct from that tradition coexisting with it at the same time, but it's only if the culture actually lasts for a significant amount of time that it gets handed on. To me, the idea of tradition necessarily involves the idea of handing on or passing on something.
Absolutely, inheriting, yeah.
Right, whereas culture, not necessarily. You can have a culture that just kind of comes into existence and goes away, is never really handed on in any meaningful sense.
Yeah, and that's to your prior point, which is, again, you can have a culture whose culture is to, critically receive the tradition. Mm-hmm. Hence, counterculture.
Right. You can have a culture, or even a kind of rival tradition that coexists with other traditions, whose what is being handed on is the critical reception of other traditions.
That's fantastic. Hey, Jack, can we do it where we overdub what Kalen says with my voice and make my lips move and make his silent? Thank you very much. Also, can we just white out Jack over there so it looks like I'm basically just giving a State of the Union? Same with Kalen. Anyways, post-production stuff. Don't worry about it, guys. We'll edit that out in post. No, I think, Kalen, I think that's a fantastic way to understand tradition and culture. And, I feel that way for the following reason. It does preserve a certain sanctity of sorts between, at least in terms of function, what one is versus the other. And if I'm understanding you correctly, culture is a sort of a function of tradition, if that makes sense? Or is it the other way?
If anything, it'd be closer to the other way because it'd be like a tradition is a culture that has been handed down and passed on.
An establishment of a culture.
Right.
Yeah. And so to change the culture would be to upend the tradition?
Potentially, yeah. So like if you change the culture at a given point, you could at least, if not upend the tradition, then fundamentally alter it. You are changing what is being handed on.
And then that in turn could become a tradition.
Could, yeah, the act of changing the tradition, yeah.
And that's kind of what I was driving at, is you could have a tradition whose tradition is to challenge its own self. To challenge
Although it would seem that kind of tradition, the one you just mentioned, could never be primary. It's necessarily secondary or maybe even parasitic, if you want to put it negatively.
How parasitic?
Interesting. In some way.
Parasitic in what sense?
Dependent maybe is a more charitable term.
I see.
In the same way that you can't have literary criticism without literature.
You're right. Yeah. No, I hear where you're coming from. And to use Jack's example, Christianity, in that sense, you consider the Crusades and stuff like that. It could be considered on some level parasitic, but it's dogmatically justified by appeal to maybe an authority, divine authority, and that becomes itself the culture.
Right, and then there's a culture that can arise and arguably did arise out of that culture of kind of critique of that tradition, both kind of within the guidelines of that tradition, kind of an internal critique, and then also more of an external critique at different times and from different areas, I suppose.
Yeah, and maybe then we're on the road to determining what the standards are for quote unquote progress.
Sure,
that could be a good start.
Nailed it. So we have one last segment. We have one last segment in this radio show. It's truth or dare. Only in this section, it's truth. So, who's your favorite professor, Jack? Don't answer that. Whatever you answer, we'll dub over Jeff Manzi.
See, this would have been so much more easy on him if he didn't know that I was actually a professor. He would have just answered Manzi and be done with it.
Well, you know what, Kalen? I've lived with that for many years, and I'm still living with that. So take advantage of it, is what I say. You're like a covert ops student.
Right. I just got to hide the faculty part of my ID badge.
Yeah. And you know what? In general, this has been a cool topic. You can't spell tradition without rad. All right. So, radical. I guess Orlando never made it. This might be his way of saying he's quitting. No, I'm joking. Hopefully the meeting went well with Orlando, and we can get a service learning situation set up where Philosophy Club students, or members, I should say, can give back by participating in the Ross Perot Museum of Science building.
Yeah, that would be great, because if we show that we have community opportunities, that could actually bring more people, because some people actually do want to have community service recorded.
You say actually like it's a weird thing.
Some people like it. Other people have to do it out of necessity. Others just for the sake of having an additional paper for graduation. Or
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, they're those status symbols. And it's so interesting. It might deserve its own story in the Chronicle, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Anything can be a story if you seek out the story, find the truths, and just say it unbiasedly.
Can we please make that, because I say please because I'm beseeching the students. It's the students who decide what the topics are. Can we make that a topic at one point in the semester, narrative at least? And I'm pushing it in the terms of myth. I keep throwing, hey, let's do myth, and nobody votes for it. Which I cry about it later and I get over it.
Well, talk to the president. We make an executive order, and
I'm the faculty advisor. How'd you like to be the president? I'm joking. I'll get a puppet government going. No, I love the fact that we vote for it. There's nothing I'd rather talk about than whatever it is people want to talk about. I'm a talker. It's what I bring to the table. That's what I have to offer.
I can tell.
That sounded sarcastic. Was that sarcasm again? Okay,
no, so just a plain insult.
Yeah, it's counterculture. All right, let's wrap it up here. You're listening to. I know you have deadlines to meet for the Chronicle, so I asked him to be here for 15 minutes tops. He stayed for 45 minutes, so that's pretty cool. You are listening to KDUX Web Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. We are the voice of Richland College. Views expressed on this show are the Richland Chronicle's own, unless otherwise stated, and do not reflect the opinion of KDUX Web Radio, Richland College, or the Anthropology Club. They do reflect the opinion of Jack Burno?
Jack Ramirez, yes.
Jack Ramirez. Well,
That's close.
sorry.
Tomato.
Tomato, potato. Listen, the Philosophy Anthropology Club meets every, what did I say, Friday? Jesus Christ.
Tuesday.
Every Tuesday from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in room EO 32. That's El Paso Hall. Room 32, just past the student life office. Every Thursday.
Yeah, bring safety equipment,
Yeah, it's going to be bloodshed. Think Hunger Games.
We do not provide the weapons.
Think Thunderdome. No, the weapon is your mind. How equipped are you? That's a real question. Not joking. You'll be stripped of your weapons quickly. Every Thursday, 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, the Philosophy Club Radio Hour broadcasts a show where the Philosophy Club student members, Anthropology Club student members, come. They recap the conversation that took place on Tuesday, and they maybe even continue it and take it to uncharted digressions, which we like to do. And to be clear, views expressed on the show are truly the Chronicle Zone. Ladies and gentlemen, what's next week's topic? We also announced that. Have we decided on that?
Yes, I think it was going to be what does it mean to be human, and what is it to be a machine, and can a human be a machine, and vice versa.
Very anthropological.
Yeah. Next week's topic, myth, folks, and narrative. AI, look, I'm super excited for this topic. I think it's a great one. It's so anthropological, it's so philosophical. What constitutes a human being, and what constitutes a robot, and is there any overlap, and to what significant extent? Very cool. Continue to check out the social media pages for the Philosophy Club and the Anthropology Club. Check us out on Instagram, and leave comments, and of course, feel free to leave comments on the YouTube channel.
You have a YouTube channel?
Well, RLC Student Media is the YouTube handle, and they put out any sort of student media related KDOX-sponsored programs, including this one. So if you go to YouTube and search Richland Philosophy Club, you'll find about 72 episodes of this show.
You're being uploaded to YouTube.
Yeah, you're being uploaded to YouTube right now. He signed the waiver. Okay.
Yeah. A waiver.
Well, folks, I have a tagline. Jack, would you like to say it? You've seen every episode, so I'm assuming you know it. It's think about it. Just say think about it in a real arrogant way.
Think about it.
Oh, you can do better than that.
Think about it.
Can we isolate that?
Yeah.
Take it easy, folks.
Arrogance is exasperation.